Go.
Hi, everyone. So I'm not exactly tech savvy like some of the other presenters are, so I've actually had to ask for help with trying to make sure that I know what's going on with Facebook Live because I suck at that. So thankfully, I've got some help going on with Zach. So thank you, Zach.
My pleasure.
And it's a good thing that I'm saying it, not spelling it. I saw that there was some things about that earlier. So I apologize in advance. I know that I usually do things like serial killers, horror movie villains. I'll be doing all that later, but I got asked if I had anything else strange and random, so I do. I have Labyrinth. Now, here's a quick question. Does anyone even know what this movie is, or am I just going completely off the radar?
The comments, it takes a minute for the comments to load because we're at about like a 5 to 6 second. What you and I are talking about right now, they're not going to see until like 6 seconds.
Shiny. Good to know.
Yeah. I've been kind of talking to them all day, thinking it's just like a live thing. And so, yeah, see, now they're coming in. Tracy Eaton says, I love that movie.
Yay! Well, then you'll know something about that movie. I call this Labyrinth the Power of the Bulge, just because reasons I'll explain later. And also, it has some fantastic music to it, too. So I'm going to give a warning real quick with this panel. So first of all, this is being presented by a complete rabid fangirl. Like, the amount of fandom that I have for this is kind of obscene. And later on, whenever I'm showing off some of the stuff that I have from Labyrinth, just to give examples of some of the merch, you'll realize there's a reason why I have to work ridiculously long hours. I have an issue. But it's going to have some trivia, some behind the scenes information. It's going to have information about the franchise. I will try to limit the singing and dancing. Usually if this is something I'm doing live, I absolutely don't even try. I try to get the audience involved. But I do have a bribe for this. And is it okay if I mention the bribe, Zach?
You ill? And actually, are you referring to the thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we actually do have a way that we can have a winner.
Yay!
So we posted that. We're thinking that, so when Michelle's ready, we will ask a Labyrinth trivia question in the chat, and then the first one to comment with the correct answer will win it. Does that sound cool for you?
I love that idea.
All right. Do you want to wait until the end, or do you want to do it like now?
Well, I'm going to at least show it now. I'll have trivia in the middle. So since we're all in quarantine, I was thinking about things that would help keep people busy while also being fun and distracting with lots of coolness. So I have a 500-piece Labyrinth puzzle, and I guarantee you that I didn't just want an excuse to buy another one just to help support this because I already have my own. It's a lot of fun. So if you're wanting to get active and involved, if you're answering questions, you might have a chance to win that. Sound okay?
That sounds great to me, and it will sound great to everybody else in about 6 seconds.
Great. So how I try to think about this whenever I'm trying to describe Labyrinth, because Zach, you asked me to give you an elevator pitch. This picture kind of sums it up. I didn't choose the fandom life. The fandom life appeared to me at my bedroom window in a shower of glitter after I wished my sibling to be taken away by goblins, held out a magic crystal and said, I've brought you a gift. And I do believe that this is pretty much how every person felt whenever they watched this, if they were the person who fell in love with David Bowie. Because why not?
So real quick, so David Bowie is the Goblin King?
He is. So he plays Jareth, the Goblin King. So David Bowie, I don't think I really need to sell the movie much more beyond that.
I mean, David Bowie is way too hot to be a goblin.
But it's okay to rule over them.
I'm kidding. Please continue.
Well, plus it's David Bowie. I mean, put him in any movie, I will watch it. I approved it by watching even a weird Western he was in, which I will defend to this day. So the question is, who here hasn't watched Labyrinth? And Zach, I'm sorry, you already gave yourself away. So just letting you know, Judgmental Cat disapproves, and so do I.
Oh, definitely. No, ever since I said that and we started this thing, they've been just murdering me in the comments.
Really?
I mean, as they should. Honestly, as they should. I mean, I know it is a very beloved movie, and for good reason. So, I have no business not watching this movie. But Tracy Eaton said, "Oh, it's David Bowie." Okay, Matt Cook said it's David Bowie. Sell point over.
That's fair. I completely agree with that. So just letting you know, if you have not seen this movie, you're stuck at home. Do it. There is no reason not to. And, you know, if you don't like glitter, I apologize in advance because it's everywhere. So for people who don't know much about the backstory of the Labyrinth, I'm sorry, you're going to get all of that information, not just the story of the movie. So what happened with how Dark Crystal actually came about was, and how Labyrinth came about was entirely due to Dark Crystal. So what happened was that afterwards, Brian Froud and Jim Henson were in a limo, and they were just really excited after all the energy after one of the showings of Dark Crystal and just how well it was received by the audience. So they automatically started thinking about what they could do next. And during that time, Labyrinth came out of it. So I really hate math, to be honest, but this is a math problem I really love. So Brian Froud plus Jim Henson plus Leno equals Labyrinth. We need that about 100 times over. They had actually originally thought about this being something mythology related with God flying across the sky, a bunch of things on those elements, but it's something that kind of evolved from that. And how Labyrinth actually came about from their conversations was after they talked about it, Brian Froud sat down and he did some drawings. And there's one that's actually really iconic with this. So I'm getting ready to show that picture, but something I think is hilarious about this is that at the time, Brian Froud did not have a son. But in the picture, there was a kid. They ended up using his kid. So I was thinking about it, if you don't have a baby, just go ahead and make one. So here is actually the picture that inspired Labyrinth. So this is the thing that really set it all off. So as you can see, you have the adorable baby with the creepy pointed feet, but I'll judge that later, surrounded by all the super cool goblins. So if you're curious about the art that goes with that, there's actually this wonderful fan art, well, not fan art, but this actual book that's put out by Brian Froud. It has a ton of the drawings from it. And I love it because it includes the cool drawings of each of the goblins. So you can actually go through, read about the different kind of goblins they are, what their names are, what their traits are, and it's pretty cool. But it also includes this picture, which is the thing that sets the entire thing into motion. So I think everyone should have this in their house, but if not, I'll just cry inside. You're just killing the storyteller, but okay. So with Labyrinth, the storyline is pretty similar to a book that had already been out. So the thing with this is it was similar to Maurice Sendak Outside Over There, and I probably butchered your name, so I apologize. So because it was so similar, it actually almost resulted in a lawsuit. Because in that story, a girl's sister, I think it is, gets stolen by goblins, and she has to go out and try to save it. Well, that's kind of following the story of the Labyrinth, so it led to some potential copyright issues.
Michelle, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you changing slides right now?
Yeah. Okay. So I hope that takes care of it. I apologize for that. So this is actually the cover of the Outside Over There. This is the thing that nearly resulted in the lawsuit. How they actually ended up resolving it was a credit acknowledgement. So with this, the storyline for Labyrinth came partially from a similar story to this, but from Brian Froud's artwork, which I will slide back and go look at if you guys need to see that, and a script. It actually started with one script from Terry Jones. He was from Monty Python, if you listen to any of that or like any of those. And from there, the script got edited 25 times, which is a very high amount. But the problem is that by the time they got towards the end of the revisions, that they had taken out most of the jokes. So then they had to take the script back to Terry Jones to have him put the funny back in it. So kind of interesting that way. Is it okay if I go back and show the picture?
Yeah, go for it, and I'll see if this fixed it.
Okay.
Okay, I can see the photo. Can you guys see the photo?
Gotta wait the 6 seconds.
Yeah, 6 seconds. That is, like, it's really cool looking, but it's also really unsettling.
It is, but I love that about it.
Well, yeah, it's part of its charm. It's almost endearing in a way, but all right, we're waiting. Who wants Ooh, who wants to be my knight in shining armor and say if we can see it?
If you start singing I Need a Hero, I'm sure someone will answer.
I need a hero. Okay, how about you just go on, and then we can edit this stuff out, by the way. But okay, yeah. William Tracy says we can all. Yeah, all right. The 6 seconds is up. Yeah, everybody's saying they can see it. So go for it, Michelle.
Okay, so we've got that. I'm gonna go on to the next slide. So I'm got time for questions right now. So before we get started, really, I have a question. Does anyone know, and this will be for the puzzle, who else was considered to play Jareth? There's several answers to this. So the first one who gets the right answer, a right answer, will get it. And no Googling. That'd be rude.
I was about to say. Oh, I'm excited. See who wins. I definitely don't know. Can I say Will Smith?
You can, but no.
Dang it.
Good try.
Total shot in the dark. All right, I'm looking at the comments right now. Nobody yet. Okay, someone said Mick Jagger.
Actually, he was one of the people that was considered.
Okay, so do they win?
They actually do.
All
he
right.
was one of them. I'm seeing. Did someone say Iggy Pop? I've just looked down at my phone. I can't see it as well.
Yeah, Elizabeth said Iggy Pop, but Jamie was technically first. Was Iggy Pop also thought?
No, but someone who's infinitely more frightening for working with children was.
Oof. Well, Mick Jagger is okay. Oh, okay, you're going.
So Michael Jackson was actually one of the considerations for this.
Yikes.
Which could have had a completely different connotation if you consider the fact that the entire movie is about the Goblin King stealing a young boy. But hey, but we also had Sting who was considered, but there was another character who was considered that could have been hilarious. They had actually thought about Kermit the Frog for potentially being able to be the Goblin King. And that would have been a very different kind of movie. And I'm glad they didn't go that route. So one thing that I think is kind of fun is how they actually asked David Bowie to take the part. So I didn't know. Does anyone have an idea of how they asked David Bowie to do that?
While you're all typing, real quick, Jamie, if you want to message the Visioncon page, we'll make sure that we get you connected and so you can get your prize. Congratulations again.
I always love it when people get stuff like that.
How did they ask him to take on the part? I'm going to guess on a cake.
On a cake?
Am I in the ballpark?
Nowhere near it.
Dang.
Think fantasy.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so how long should I give this before I just give it away as far as the answer?
Give it until I will read off when people start guessing. I'll guess once more. Was it something to do with like a bow and arrow?
No, but you're getting towards more interesting part.
I'm in the ballpark. Okay. All right. Jamie said awesome. Thank you. So I'd say I'll guess one more time, and then if nobody out that, then we'll move on.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm in the ballpark. Did they? Okay. Elizabeth guessed they had Kermit ask him, and then Tracy Eaton said they sent a scrolled invite.
Actually, Tracy's the closest. They didn't send a scrolled invite, but they did send him something that was kind of fantasy based. So they actually made a pipe for him, as far as like a pipe you can play on. And they did it in a very fantasy based style, and they had the prop department make it. And that's how they gave it to him to ask. And he got so excited about it, he picked up the pipe, jumped up on top of a table or a dresser. It's kind of unclear from the stories that you hear, and just started playing it. And the way that they said that was at that moment, Jim Henson and Brian Froud knew he was going to be the person that had to play the role no matter what. So very cool. So for the characters in Labyrinth, we have our main character, our heroine. We have Sarah, who is 16 years old. And in her room, if you're watching the movie, you can see a lot of the elements that show up later in the movie. You actually see some books, you see the Labyrinth toy, so the wooden toy where you actually have to try to get the ball through the maze. You see several stuffed animals in the background, like you see Sir Didymus, you see some of the Fieries, you see a lot of the elements that are going to come in later. There's also, I think it's a bookend or something like that that looks like a hoggle. You also see on her mirror pictures of her mother and her mother's co-star, because her mother's an actress. And her mother's co-star is David Bowie. if you go into the actual story of the Labyrinth later on, you actually figure out that her mom's an actress who left her family so that she could be with him. So kind of a weird thing that she was thinking about him, but whatever. So with the relationship, something that's interesting about Sarah is she doesn't necessarily have the best relationships with her family. She feels very misunderstood, very misrepresented. So, you know, kind of like teenagers do. But something I love with this is use your right words. She's frustrated. She's having to watch her little brother, and she's wanting to be able to just get away and be a teenager. So she keeps saying all these things to her brother in anger. But finally, she uses her right words and she wishes her brother was away to some goblins. So Toby, the brother, he actually adapted pretty well to the Labyrinth. Are you able to see that screen? Just making sure real quick.
Sorry, I muted my audio so I could do something. Yes, we can.
Okay, just making sure. So Toby actually adapted really well to Labyrinth, and Jareth, the character, liked him so well that he said he was going to name him Jareth, just giving him that name. Overall, though, even though Toby's the thing that's driving the entire storyline, he doesn't really play a central part. For first impressions, with this baby, the baby that actually played in Toby, he actually wasn't very cooperative in filming. There were parts where he would need to coo and he wouldn't do it. There were parts where he needed to be able to pay attention, and David Bowie would actually have to put a puppet on his hand, have it off screen, and be making faces so that Toby would look at it instead of, you know, anywhere else. So he was pretty frustrating, and the baby actually wouldn't even coo whenever they needed him to. So if you listen to the song Dance Magic Dance, all the baby sounds in that are David Bowie. So, you know, random knowledge. So here are the cast of Sarah's friends. So you should be able to see them on the screen. We have Ludo, the big guy, Hoggle in between, and then we have Sir Didymus on his trusty steed, Ambrosius. Fun little fact about Ambrosius, he's actually also the same dog that played Sarah's dog earlier in the storyline, because she has a pet. So his name is Merlin Ambrosius, which if you read another storyline goes towards a different character, but it's a cool little reference. So here's a question for anyone who's watching. Which friend was the most challenging for the Jim Henson Creature Shop to actually build? So think about it. We have Hoggle, we have Ludo, we have Sir Didymus, complete with some occasional animatronic dog. Which one of those do you think was the most challenging build for the department? I ask way too many questions, so I apologize.
Don't at all. This is why we're all here. I'm going to say the big one.
The big one?
Okay, and Tracy Eaton said Hoggy, or Hoggle, rather. And then Sarah Kane also said Hoggle.
The answer is Hoggle.
Nailed it.
The reason why Hoggle was so hard is because it took so much cooperation between the people doing it. They had to have the actress who was actually in the Hoggle outfit, and she could only see whenever Hoggle's mouth was open. So otherwise she couldn't really see anything. But then they had 4 puppeteers who were actually making all the muscles and animatronics work. So in that, there were 18 motors, which are going at all times. And the voice actor for this is actually, I think it's actually Brian Henson. So I'm Jim Henson's son. And they actually had to practice for a few weeks to be able to get everything to match up all right. But you were pretty close with Ludo, because that suit originally had to be rebuilt. Whenever they first made it, it weighed 100 pounds. And Jim Henson made them go and restart from scratch because it was just too heavy for any one actor to wear. So they rebuilt it, and it came out at a very light 75 pounds. Okay, not that much different, but it did help out. But they did have to actually get 2 actors to take turns in that outfit because it was so heavy. So here we have the Labyrinth Encounters. So Zach, this is going to be spoilers, and anyone who hasn't seen this is a spoilers, but I don't apologize because you really should have seen it by now. So in this, we run into pixies and fairies that we think are supposed to be these kind, gentle things. But in a lot of ways, they're not. They're cute and adorable, but they'll bite you and they'll hurt you. And something I think is kind of hilarious about that is whenever Hoggle says, well, what did you think they do? But the fun part about it is if you go back to Fae mythology, fairies, Fae, they actually weren't these sweet, lovable things. They were tricksters. They were jerks, really. So I thought it was fun that they kept that element there. We also have the delightful worm, who I absolutely love. He is the one who keeps our story going because Sarah has 13 hours to get through the labyrinth, and she has to get to the castle to go rescue her brother. And she does a terrible thing. She starts heading towards the castle. She chooses the correct path, but it's okay. Our trusty little caterpillar convinces her to go the wrong way. And then as she starts walking away, he tells her, she'd have gone that way. She'd have gone straight to that castle. But what's kind of fun about him is he doesn't have a huge part in the movie, but later on in the franchise, if you go with some of the canon stories that are built on later on, he actually does become more prominent.
Well, does he have a name? Does he have a name? Because I love him.
I don't think he does have a name. He just gets called the Worm. Of course, I could be wrong. I'll have to check through the Archaea comics. I know his daughter later on has a name. Here we have our guards who are guarding the doors. What's kind of fun about them is that they have this thing where one of them always tells the truth, one of them always lies. So Sarah has to figure that out so she can get beyond their doors to try to figure out which way to go. But she does the worst thing possible. She asks one of them if the other one would tell her that that door leads to the castle. And then she says, well, based on that, I know that you're lying. Well, if you weren't lying, he would be lying. The problem with that question is, regardless, she would have been able to get that same logic out of asking either of them. So whatever, not the smartest move. But something that's kind of fun about these characters that a lot of people don't know is their coloring was actually based off of Thomas the Tank Engine. So the creators of this, as far as the Henson Studio, actually looked at that and used that as some material for whenever they were trying to color this and come up with ideas for it, which I think is fun. But another thing about it is that there's a lot of back and forth in them. So the heads on top and the heads on bottom all talk. So it goes back and forth quite a bit. Then whenever she goes through those doors, she of course chose the wrong way. She consistently does that. And she goes into the helping hands. So Zach, I got a question for you. If you were stuck going down a hole and a bunch of hands were randomly grabbing you and they gave you the option of going up towards the light where you came from or down in a random hole, which one are you going to choose?
Oh, I feel like this is a trick question because I feel like the light one is a trap, but you know what? I'm going to hedge my bets at the trap or the light.
You would have chosen right by going towards the light. The problem is that Sarah chooses wrong. She says, well, I'm already pointing that way, so I guess down. So she ends up going down into an oubliette, which is a place where you put people to forget about them. That's actually exactly how it's described. But do you even know, do you know what oubliettes are?
I can't say that I do, personally.
They were essentially French dungeons, I believe it was. I think it was French. I haven't looked up torture devices in a while, which is a random thing to admit that you've looked up now that I say it out loud. But what they would do is they would put people in these holes and stuff underground, and they would only have an exit through the top. And they would often just leave them there and forget about them, and they would die because they weren't even getting fed. So the fact that she ends up in an oubliette is actually rather terrifying if you know your history. And next step from that, she finally gets out the oubliette with the help of Hoggle. But then she ends up with these guys who are some of the only creatures that have ever genuinely scared me. So as a kid, I was completely in love with the Cryptkeeper, completely in love with Freddy Krueger, but these guys creep me out. Can't trust them. But what they do is they are singing, dancing characters, and they like disassembling their bodies and throwing them around and having fun with them. So what they'll do is like one person will take off their head and they'll use it all as a volleyball. Then another person will take off his leg and use it to play croquet with because, you know, completely normal for these fireys. Well, they decide that Sarah should join in, so they start trying to take off her head. Well, to escape, she grabs one's head, she throws it away, and her and Hogwarts go through. The next big encounter, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going kind of fast, but it's because I'm trying to keep it all within time.
Just real quick, Tracy Eaton says, yes, that word that you said was French. And Jamie also said they've always creeped her out as well.
Thank God. They look like angry chickens.
They were definitely unsettling.
To me, it just looks like something that the Colonel would release on the world to get vengeance for us all eating at Burger King.
That's quick. I like it.
The next thing is the Labyrinth dance scene, which I completely love. What happens is Sarah ends up eating a peach that's kind of laced with something. We're assuming magic, at least we're hoping so, because it's a children's movie, supposedly. And she ends up in this ballroom scene where she's wearing this gorgeous ball gown that you actually see on a dancing figure in the beginning of the movie in her room. And she's surrounded by these dancers, and in this is the wonderfully enigmatic Goblin King, who, yeah, definitely in love with him in the scene more than I even was in the beginning. He goes through, he's dancing, and then he starts dancing with her. And you can see that she's completely entranced with him. But as she's dancing, she starts to remember why she was there, because during this time, she has forgotten everything. She doesn't remember why she's in Labyrinth. She doesn't remember Toby, nothing. The more she's dancing with Jared, the more she's starting to figure out that something's wrong. And she decides to escape by picking up a chair and crashing it against the side of the ballroom. You know, completely normal, but it works and she's able to escape. But what's really fun about this scene is all the goblins' masks in this, if you actually look, are all different. They're not the same at all. And a lot of the characters, if you're looking, have different elements of nobility that would make sense, but they're all slightly distorted, which goes with the fantasy element. So here's a random question for people. Does anyone know how Labyrinth and Star Trek are actually linked together?
Real quick, before we get on this question, Sarah Kane said, I used to dance around my living room every time that scene played.
You're not alone. I actually have a problem. So I fell in love with David Bowie, but I realized that I was never going to be able to be around him. So the closest thing for me was I just did a cosplay. So I did the actual outfit for it. This has over 200 hand-sewn sequins. I hate my life whenever I have to think about that. That took forever.
So how does Labyrinth have a link to Star Trek? Before I go dark, I'm gonna give it a shot. It's not in the same universe, is it?
Not at all.
All right. Well, that was my guess. Do they both have spaceships? Okay. Well, I'm out of guesses.
Although it would have been really hilarious if it just ended up being in the holodeck. That would have been great.
Okay. And Tracy Eaton said Gates McFadden.
We have a winner.
Woo!
The Good Doctor was actually the one who choreographed that entire scene. So she actually was also one of the dancers in it, but I think she might have been uncredited in that. But as far as the dance that Jareth and Sarah do and the ballroom dances around them, that was all choreographed by her. So I love it because we get a nice little intersect. So like I said, I always like to think that holodeck was involved somehow. So we do have the songs of the Labyrinth. So we have David Bowie, who did the songs that are listed on the left. We have Trevor Jones, who did the songs on the right. And what's really fun about this is all those songs with singing and all that, that was David Bowie. He was singing all of those. And some of these actually ended up being videos that were used to promote it. So they would actually take scenes from the movie, scenes with David Bowie, and use that to be the promo. So I know that Magic Dance was one of them. And I can't remember, I think it might have been Underground that was the other. I probably should have that memorized, but if you want to look up some really interesting music videos, not saying that all music videos from the 80s were crazy, but these definitely fit with that. So I have a lot of questions in this, so I apologize. This one is just a question for where David Bowie got the inspiration for the song Magic Dance. So just to give you an idea, the way the song starts out is, you remind me of the babe. What babe? The babe with the power. What power? Power of voodoo. Hoodoo. You do. Do what? Remind me of the babe. So does anyone know where that actually came from?
I'm gonna give it a shot. Is it from The Babe? Wasn't there a book about a pig called The Babe?
No.
Okay.
There might have been, I don't know, but that's not what this is from. This
Right.
is actually from something fairly obscure that I'm not sure many other people have watched. Honestly, it's not a great movie. I wouldn't recommend it,
All right.
but other people might love it.
We'll swing and a miss. We'll see once the delay stops if anybody guesses the right answer.
Gotta love the delay.
Hey, what's going on, Cameron?
Should I just give it away?
Let's give him. Oh, okay. Somebody, Scatman Carruthers.
No, but I would have loved to have seen that happen. That could have been pretty interesting.
Okay, Jamie says she's heard it before, but she can't remember.
Okay. Well, the answer is The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer. It was actually a interesting movie with Cary Grant and Shirley Temple. And how they actually have it in this scene is Cary Grant comes in and he's trying to act like this cool young hip guy. And he says, "You remind me of the man." "What man?" "Man with a power." "What power?" "Power of hoodoo." "You do." "You do." "Do what?" "Remind me of the man." And it just keeps going in a loop. And that's actually where Jareth got that, as far as, that's where David Bowie got it, and then he ended up adapting it to this song. So here's something I want everyone just to picture for a few seconds. What would this movie have been like or sounded like if Michael Jackson or Sting had gotten the role instead, knowing just how much that David Bowie had as far as writing the music from that earlier slide and singing the music? I think it would have had a really different tone, a really different element. And I'll be honest, I still probably watched it. I would have watched it if it was Sting. If it had been Kermit, I'm not so sure. I mean, just saying. So here are some random canon facts for people who like the Labyrinth or who are thinking about it. So originally, if you go by the storyline, so in this book, it actually tells you the actual history of the Labyrinth, which is fun. In that, goblins originally ruled the Labyrinth. So they didn't have a king. They didn't have a, humanoid figure or whatever species Jareth is. I just call him perfection. But what happened was they ruled themselves, but they had the great collapse of good governance. So what happened is they had rulers who all ruled, but no one was allowed to know their names. So what would happen then is some of them would want recognition, but since they couldn't use their names, they would come up with these nicknames. Well, then they became so obsessed with their nicknames being known that it led to a lot of corruption, a lot of issues, and then the ultimate collapse of the government. So that's something that happened. David Bowie, whenever he was asked how Jareth took over the Labyrinth, actually said his theory was that Jareth didn't really want it. He kind of had it thrust upon him. So as you can tell, Jareth's kind of a reluctant ruler, but he's still pretty good. Whenever he's not kicking his subjects or throwing them into the bog of eternal stench. And for anyone who gets really annoyed, there is actually a traditional goblin challenge. So if someone upsets you and you are ready to fight, or you're going to have to fend them off, the goblin challenge is actually halt and all that. So not very intimidating, but goblinish. I accept it as canon. And according to the storyline, Brian Froud apparently found the book with all the information about the Labyrinth from a foregoblin that put it out there. So in the mythology of it, they didn't write Labyrinth, they found the storyline and went from there. And here's just something kind of fun. What movie was being filmed next door that's kind of in a related field to this that was kind of fun? So they had two movies that were filming next door. There's Labyrinth and there's another that's kind of related, same time period. Does anyone know what that movie was?
Lord of the Rings.
You're not even trying.
No, I genuinely was. They're both fantasy.
It's like 1985.
And was Lord of the Rings filmed?
I just died a little.
I know. Ah, well, you miss every shot you don't take.
Fair enough.
Okay, Jamie said, guessed Never-Ending Story.
Kind of close. Think a little bit different. Think Tim Curry. Tim Curry, 80s fantasy.
Oh, Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I said fantasy, not sexual confusion.
Okay. Okay, Deanna said Legend? Yes! Woo,
So
yeah.
it was Legend. They actually were filming next door, and there's all kinds of things going on. So what's kind of fun is if you think about those characters being so close, I really wish there would have been some behind the scenes feelings. That would have been fun. But something did come out of this. Brian Henson met the wonderful lead actress from Legend, and they kind of hit it off. After filming was over, they didn't have much to do with each other, but later on they reunited, and now they're actually married, and that makes me so happy that we have that crossover. So the original franchise is something where they tried selling quite a bit. They had comic books with this art style. Honestly, the comic books aren't that great, but you might enjoy them. They had costumes complete with the terrible plastic covers and the terrible plastic masks. They had lunch boxes. They really tried going all out. But with Labyrinth, there were some things that were a little bit different. So they even had Nintendo games. They had one game that supposedly came out in the US. It was only on a certain computer system. I've never been able to find it. I have looked everywhere. But they did have a Japanese Nintendo game that was never released in the US, but you can find fan copies. And I will tell you, it is evil. It is hard. I have never been able to get through even the first stage of this game because I keep getting killed by these evil fairies that fight me. So I don't know, people like that. So one thing that's kind of sad about Labyrinth is now a lot of people know it. It's a cult classic. People love it, except for, people who haven't met it yet. So what's kind of funny about this is it was a financial flop at first. It actually deeply depressed Jim Henson to think that had happened. And that was even harder because this was his last feature-length film that he did before dying. But now Labyrinth is huge. There's actually a yearly ball. It's called, I think it's like Jareth's Ball or the Labyrinth Masquerade. And people get together dressed as fancy characters. Some people actually make dresses based on some of the characters. I saw one that someone did based on the Helping Hands. It was gorgeous. There was a manga that came out. And I think that the authors, I'm not the author, but the cover artist is the same one that did Alishino. I don't know if there's manga fans out there. There were comic books, there are video games, there are board games, there are adventure games. And what I really love is like Archaea, if you like reading comics, has a ton of different things they've done from this. So they've done anniversary stories. They recently released something called Labyrinth Coronation. And this is great because it actually tells the origin stories of Labyrinth based on the actual now canon story. So this tells about how Jareth's mother tried to save him whenever his father wished him away to Labyrinth. And then we find out, oh, that's how this happened. There are several other things. I don't even want to pull all this out. So I'm just going to point this over here. There's even board games with several expansions. And you can see one of my lovely figures over there too. And children's books. So this is a children's find it game where you go through and you have to find different objects. So it's gone everywhere. So while this movie may not have originally met Jim Henson's goals, it did eventually become everything that he had hoped for as far as fan engagement and fans loving it. And then you have the rabid fans like me. So Labyrinth actually changed a lot of things that people don't think about. So first of all, in the opening scene, you see this gorgeous owl, or at least at the time, gorgeous owl, that starts flying towards on screen. This was actually the first attempt at a realistic CGI animal. So that's something that Labyrinth was really on the forefront of. And now if you think about how many different movies we use CGI on, that's huge. Another thing that was really great about this is up until that point, David Bowie was seen as very edgy. He was always kind of shocking people. I mean, he's the one who would wear women's clothes. He's the one who would come out in a different persona. It's just one of those things that he was always a rocker. So it was kind of fun because this is something that made him more family friendly and more approachable. And it was also Jim Henson's last movie. And as a Creature Shop fan, it's kind of sad. So that's kind of my rant, and just letting you know, Zach, I do love Rocky Horror Picture Show, but that wasn't it.
You miss every shot you don't take.
That's true, and I do think that you can really define a person based on how they know Tim Curry. So which stage was it? So does anyone have any questions about Labyrinth, or have I completely bored you all and put you to sleep?
Oh, no, they're chiming in, but they're mostly agreeing with what you have to say. Let's give it the delay to see what they say. Matt Cook said he remembers this. I believe that was I didn't want to cut you off because you were in a pretty interesting lecture. So, or not lecture, a very interesting point that you were talking about. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I believe he meant that about the video game.
As far as it being, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
He said in his comment, LOL, I remember this. And so I think he said that around the time you were talking about the video game, and I didn't want to interrupt you when he said it. So I believe that's what he's referring to. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong. Michi, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, said, I enjoyed this very much, which, yeah, I believe we all did. I learned a lot of new things.
So watch it. It's a lot of fun. And you'll really appreciate how we don't use glitter as much anymore.
I mean, why don't we use glitter as much?
I just want to know what they spent on the glitter. I want to know the glitter budget.
The glitter budget.
It should be a thing we know. Why is that not in the stats? So that's kind of all I have for this, unless anyone has any questions. If you're watching this, I'll be doing some other panels. I know that I'm doing some horror villains as far as profiling. I'm doing some anime horror profiling tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about serial killers later tonight, which some people like, and, you know, completely normal for a rabid fangirl like that too, because why not?
I'm personally psyched for the anime one, but...
Well, if you like Psychopaths, then you'll probably like it.
I'm there.
Yay!
Right. So I'm getting them. Okay. Okay, Jamie said she's sad that she missed the first part, but was glad that she won something, and then she thanks you for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
Elizabeth said she plans to cosplay as one of the ball goers eventually.
If you do that, please contact me on my Storyteller Facebook page. I have my entire Jared's outfit. I demand pictures.
And Matthew Cook said he was referring to the video game, so nailed it.
Good job.
Yeah, Michi said they were pretty tight on the pant budget. That's fine.
You know, I'm not sure that it was pants or just painted on, but whatever it was, I appreciate it. But the weird thing about this, and this is why the entire thing's called The Power of the Bulge, so I guess I can explain that now, is that if you watch it, as the movie goes on, the bulge seems to get bigger and bigger, so it seems like they were just trying to distract some of the viewers from some of the plot holes that existed. At least that's a theory I have.
So is this the end of the presentation?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, so we'll make sure to cut this part. I'm going to stop it right now, and I'll refresh my video.